Hey everybody! In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to take a very simple stencil and a bunch of different tools that you already have to create a super realistic, natural looking portrait of some beach rocks. So I am using the Hero Hues Reactive Root Beer ink to do a little bit of stencil printing to start with. This is going to give me a sort of distressed background to build the rest of the stone texture on. And what you do is you put ink all over the back of the stencil and then you mist it with water, which I'll do off to the side so I don't splatter my cardstock. Get that as wet as you want it to be. Flip it over and do a print on top of your card panel. Now, this is never perfect, so don't expect it to be perfect. Depends on how much water you put on there, etc. But it gives you a very organic background for you to work on the rest of the stones and pebbles with. And I love it so much. If you want, you could take a paintbrush while this is still wet, and you could take this wet, reactive, water reactive ink, and you could fill in some of these areas if you want. Personally, I like it sort of here and there, like it ended up when I printed it, so I don't really do that. So you'll want to clean your stencil. The best way to do this is with rubbing alcohol because it dries the stencil instantly. If you put water on a stencil to clean it and then you're moving on to another step, you can actually have some residual water that will impact your design during the next phase, which you'll understand in just a second. So I really recommend rubbing alcohol for cleaning your stencils. So I am going to heat dry this. You'll want this to be completely dry for the next step. And I'm putting it on some tape that's already on my glass mat to just hold it down to my work surface while I put the stencil back on. So you'll want to put it on the same way, obviously, that you printed it with so that it will mask out the exact same areas that you applied ink to before you move on to the next step. Now, I'm going to tape the stencil down to my work surface as well. You could also use a grip mat, a sticky mat. You have a lot of options. I'm choosing tape today, but this is totally up to you. And I want to tell you the inspiration for this project is an artist that I fell in love with when I lived for a summer after college in Maine, who did these incredibly realistic watercolors of the stones on the beach in Maine. And so this is an ode to that artist, and I did the best I could. I hope you like it. The first step is to ink blend very softly some granite ink all over all of the stones and pebbles. This is intended to be a light base layer that is going to distinguish the stones and pebbles from the area that I stencil printed with and give me a base to build on for texture. Now you can add texture a couple different ways. This is a flat stencil brush. You can take that and tap it onto the stones if you'd like. I do find that this is a little bit more time consuming than what I'm going to show you next. So what I will do is now give the stones some dimension by using a smaller brush and a wet cement ink to go around mostly the bottom portion of these stones. You're going to see when I lift the stencil off, like the method to my madness here. But it makes a big difference if you shade one side of the stones instead of all of them. So just stick with me. I promise you're really going to love this result. Now I'm going to take a little bit of cornflower ink, and this is because the stones on the beach in Maine that have been polished kind of smooth have not just like the striations and the little dots that you're going to see, but they also have like this blue-gray tint to them that I just love. Then I took an Amazon box, don't judge me, and I pulled off the paper like I showed you in the beginning, and I'm using this as a stamp to stamp the striations that you see on those main beach rocks randomly across these stones. And this gives like a distressed stripe. It's not as even as a stamp. It has the texture of the cardboard, and it's just a tool that I love to have around in my stamp room. So now I'm taking the smallest Hero Arts brush, and I am doing some more kind of targeted blending around the edges of these stones to add a darker color and just a little bit more of that dimension. So this will give you even a more kind of 3D look when we're done that I think you'll really like. And then I'm going to finish with some fun texture effects after I've done this. But if you really pay attention to each stone with these little blending brushes, I think you're going to like the result a lot. So let's move on to splattering. So I'm taking the same root beer ink, and I'm going to show you two different ways to do these splatters. So first, spray a little bit of water onto the root beer ink, and then take a teeny tiny brush. I cannot tell you how small. This is my smallest detailed watercolor brush. And the smaller your brush, the smaller the little splatters will be. So this is giving me a very fine, very dark splatter over these rocks, and it looks super realistic. It looks just like these beach rocks look. But you can see that how tiny these little dots are that are going onto my rocks. So small brush, small dots. So once you have that the way you like it, we will actually switch to a larger brush, which will give us larger, more diffuse dots for the next layer. And they'll sort of move into the background from these tiny sort of distinct dots that I've gotten with the root beer. And it's just such a nice contrast, and it looks so organic in the end that I think you'll really like it. So smush down some granite ink. If you want to do wet cement too, that's fine. I ended up just using the granite, and spray some water on it. You can barely see the granite ink because it's so pale, but then take your larger brush. So a larger brush will give larger dots, and splatter this all on top of what you've already done. And it's going to give you like a very watercolor effect in the background. It's so cool to see the two different kinds of dots. Like, just trust me until you see the close-up that the contrast between those two steps really makes this background shine. I think you'll really love it. So I'm going to keep you in suspense while I remove the tape, remove the stencil from the tape, and then pick up this entire thing after I've dried it. And you'll also see what a big difference that tiny touch of blue makes in these rocks and how realistic that looks. So if you can look at them up close, you can see how it really looks like rocks in a tide pool on the beach. And from a very simple stencil to a very organic looking finished card, I think it's pretty hard to beat. And I had a lot of fun creating this. So head over to the blog for more information, and thanks so much for watching.